Welcome to the Biz Easy podcast, where small business is simplified for greater results. Brought to you by Resources and Development. Go to www.resources-development.com for help in taking your business to the next level. And now, help me welcome the host of the Biz Easy podcast, Steve McCrillis.
Welcome to another Biz Easy podcast, your resource to help take your business to the next level. My name is Steve. I'm your host as we all learn how to stay better focused on the things that make you great. Now, I'd like to introduce you to my partner and our resident guru of coaching, our lead business coach, Skip Williams.
Hey, thanks, Steve. How you doing today?
Excellent.
Do you remember that girl Lisa who wrote us to say that I had to loosen up a little bit and not be so serious?
Yeah, she said that you look too serious.
Yeah. Well, she wrote back and said my jokes are lame and that we need to add a rim shot or something so that she knows when to laugh. I never heard of such a thing, but all I can promise you, Lisa, is that we'll try to add the rim shot because, frankly, I may be funny looking, but I'm not really that funny. So let's try this one today. My girlfriend said last night, "You treat our relationship like a game," and that unfortunately cost her 12 points and a bonus chance.
Oh, and rim shot?
Boom. There we go. Now to the serious stuff, Steve. Do you ever notice that either in your own business or when visiting another business, that some employees love what they do and others wish that they weren't there or they struggle to be even competent? Do you wish that every employee that you hired was happy and productive? Or do you take the attitude that you're not paying them to be happy?
Happy employees are productive employees.
I think the days of not paying them to be happy are over, right? I'm not saying you can't be tough, sometimes even demanding. But at the end of the day, if your employees are not happy with you, you'll pay for that in 100 different ways without even knowing it. It might be theft. They might not be friendly to customers, not concerned with quality, just plain apathetic, no pride or job ownership. They could be backstabbing you or other employees, and there's scores of other creative ways that we haven't even thought about, but they have.
Skip, what is most concerning is the apathy that a business owner realizes from his staff that seriously impedes the general operation of the company. But when you think about it, the employees agree to come on board, given the description of responsibilities that the owner provides, then finds that it's not what they signed up for. Why is that?
Yeah, setting clear expectations sometimes is not there, either in the sales pitch that you gave them to take the job or the employee job description. But setting those clear expectations ahead of time can save you a lot of trouble later on, right? But a lot of this can be due to a toxic workplace culture, and I'm going to save that topic for another day, because the start of having happy employees starts with hiring the employees with the right fit for the right job. Hiring someone just because they're willing is not enough. You don't do him or her any favors by hiring them into a job that does not ultimately fit them. More importantly, when their unhappiness turns to resentment, extracting it from that job is usually very painful, and more recently than in past years can end up in litigation or involve state agencies. So it makes sense to have the right butts in the right seats, so to speak, and to never settle for marginal applicants. But how do we make sure that we have a good applicant sitting in front of us for that interview?
Well, that's a great question. Like many other facets of the business owner skill set, he likely has never had the training or coaching required to properly interview employees. I remember one of my first management positions way back, it was in the 18th century, I think, where I was hiring for a tuxedo or formal wear shop. And I just did the usual things, asked them, what they thought about this and told them about the job and tried to talk them into it. Is it the business owner are just looking for a means to clone themselves?
Well, yeah, that's the idea, right? To duplicate the skills that you have, so that they can do some of that work. Absolutely, but unfortunately, we sometimes think we see a clone when they aren't there. All too often, and your point about training is good too, because, and I won't even get into this today, but there's a lot of questions that are illegal to ask, and you certainly don't want to get caught in that trap either.
Oh,
But
true.
but all too often, employers start an interview by asking a question or two, and then begin telling the applicant about the company or about themselves, ultimately taking over the bulk of that conversation. This telegraphs the response that the employer is looking for. And after the applicant nods their head a couple of times and agrees with the interviewer begins to see or believe that that person is exactly what the company needs and perhaps sees a younger version of themselves in that candidate. We call that the halo effect.
The halo effect, a great concept to understand, one that I don't think most people really understand. So once you know the pitfall, how does a person overcome this?
You have to start by creating a set of questions that are unique to the position that you're hiring for, that you ask all the candidates for that particular job position. These questions are designed to draw more and more information from the candidate, but by being open-ended and with follow-up questions like, tell me more about that, or tell me about a time that, or how did this make you feel? Those open-ended questions will, open-ended portions will probably tell you more than the initial question itself. But before we can design those questions, we first have to know what characteristics we're looking for. And the characteristics we need for one description, for example, a janitor, is not what we'll be looking for in another, like a teacher. So each job description should have its own set of questions that search for the characteristics that you're looking for. And we determine that by looking at other employees with the same job title.
So the questions should be crafted, if you will, to identify certain key characteristics of the skill set required to get the job done. Now, in a perfect world, the small business owner should know what each of those jobs are. We're not assuming we're talking about IBM or Apple or Tesla or anything like that. They're small businesses, so they should know each one of those job descriptions and the skill set that it requires. Now, on some level, doesn't the business owner have those skill sets? So being able to craft those questions shouldn't be a real challenge, should it?
Well, to get to the skill sets, yes, it isn't that difficult. But I'm talking about more than that, Steve. And let me give you an example I've used a few times. You ever gone into a hotel and dealt with the front desk employee when you're checking in or checking out, especially when it's busy? There's a lot of skills that are needed. You need computer skills and amongst other things. But I'll give you an example. I have those skill sets to operate that computer and get that guest checked in. But what I'm looking for is that person who smiles, who that person has been on a plane for the last 8 hours, traveling all day. They're tired and they're grumpy, and to be able to turn that frown upside down. I don't have that skill set, and that's not a skill set. That's a personality. Some people take it as a challenge to turn that person's day around. I may be able to do this job technically, but after dealing with a few guests like that, I'd be ready to shoot myself. So we're looking for the people who have the personality traits, that natural innate talent. That we can teach them the skills. If they don't know how to use the computer to check them in, that's easy enough to teach them. But the characteristics that you need to do that job effectively is something else, and that's a little bit harder to find. So how do you figure that out? We first look at the good employees that do that job. Let's take a look at our top 5 performers, for example, and kind of dissect what it is that what is it about their personalities, about that makes them really good at what they do. What separates them from the marginal employees? And it might be worth taking a look at the marginal employees too and seeing what they lack. But once we do that, we should understand the characteristics we're looking for. Somebody who smiles, somebody who's friendly, maybe not, maybe somebody who is detail oriented, somebody who is good, has a natural affinity for numbers. Whatever those traits are, that's what we need to be looking for. What makes them the perfect fit. Once we understand those characteristics, then we can design questions that help us determine whether that candidate has similar ones. The process can take a couple of days of observation, and it can take a couple hours to write down the questions. But if it saves you just one lawsuit or some employee's sabotage, then it's time well spent.
I just recently had an experience with 84 Lumber. It's a place I was picking up supplies to build a deck on my back porch. And I had a guy who I had never seen there before. I'd been there several times. And he really fumbled around with the computer. Of course, I was very patient. I understand, he was new. He identified himself that way. But he went out of his way to show me things and to take me to where I needed to go and ask me the proper questions. And suddenly, the guy I had been dealing with, who was the assistant manager of the place, his name was Mike. He's a true customer service guy. I had to point out Cameron to say, I'll tell you what, this guy really has the right attitude to do this job. I mean, let's be honest, I would take attitude over credentials any day, but he has that customer service ethic. So too many times I've been with business owners only to have him complain about the revolving door that is a part of his hiring process. And I think that they don't necessarily look for attitude as much as they look for credentials. So what I hear you saying is craft that particular question or series of questions around what it is they're going to do. Is that a fair take?
That's right. I mean, that when you have a revolving door, typically the problem is not money. It is something about you or the person that they report to. It's a failure of the supervisor more than it is anything else, typically. Sure. So like most Steve, like most tasks in a business, these questions and this hiring process, interviewing process needs to be turned into a process and memorialized so that we can take away the subjective nature of the interview and it begins to turn it into a scientific or a mathematical endeavor that provides a much higher degree of success, not to mention ultimately adds value to your business.
Before I endeavored into becoming a financial advisor, working for a large, well-known broker, I had to take a very computerized pick one answer to match, and I recognized that many of the questions were repeats of previous questions with the phrases switched around. I don't know what the name of that was. Aren't you working on a program that removes that subjective aspect of the hiring process?
Yes, and there are a few out there, but I have actually been working on a more scientific method right now, but it's a very simple, easy one that takes the Myers-Briggs personality test.
Myers-Briggs, that's what it was.
And it charts the results against the top performers for that job. So you can see if that person that you're interviewing has the natural talents, the aptitude, the personality necessary to perform that job, perform well at the job. If anybody out there is interested and you and your company are interested in helping me perfect this tool, please reach out to me. It's mechanically working fine. We just want to test it and see if it does give us the pictures that we're looking for our job candidates.
I said
that said, interviewing should not be an art, a hunch, or a good feeling, unless you're just looking for a lunch buddy, of course. So, rather, it should be as standard and scientific as possible so that you can easily compare one candidate to another, 2 or 3 days later when you're referring to your notes. And always pay attention to those red flags. What most business owners are relying on are their gut instincts when interviewing, and there is nothing wrong with that. Business owners do have good gut instincts, but I would steer you towards using them for the negative red flags as opposed to positive, I got to hire this guy.
So Skip, let me ask you a quick question. What would be an example of a red flag? If you're talking to a potential candidate, what would be an example of a red flag as you see it?
Okay, you've just asked me why I left my last job. Oh, my supervisor was a jerk. He was always on my back. That would be a big red flag, right? It shows you that this person probably doesn't like to be asked to do things. He may be even lazy. There's a 5% chance that it might be a really jerk supervisor, but 95% of the time it's the employee That
Yeah.
so so pay attention to those red flags. And lastly, make sure you never do more than 10% of the talking. Do not telegraph your feelings about the answers, and that can be not in nonverbal ways as well. And the time to sell them about your company and why they should take this job is later, when you've already decided that this candidate is the candidate you want.
You talk about telegraphing. Give me go into that in a little greater depth. What you mean by telegraphing?
Okay, the candidate has answered your question, and you start to nod your head as you're writing your notes. That would be a telegraphing that he's on the right track, giving the right answers, whatever. You want to be as stoic as possible during the process.
Okay. Well, just for those who listen, Skip can be reached at skip@resources-development.com if you're interested in being a test site for this new program. Skip, let me ask you, doesn't this seem like a long and tedious process that business owners must go through to get the employees they're looking for? I mean, it just seems like it's not, have somebody come in, ask them a bunch of questions. It seems a lot more of a, as you put it, a process.
A rigmarole, right? It's easier than you think, Steve. It's easier than you think, because it really doesn't take as long as you think to sit down and think through some pertinent questions that might be asked of that candidate, and to think through the process of what it is you're looking for. But having said that, even if it is a long and drawn out process, even if it is a rigmarole, these employees are going to be with you at your side, hopefully for a long time. And if they're good, they're going to make your life easy. If they're bad, they're going to make your life difficult. So spending a little extra time on finding the right employees, rather than just somebody that has a pulse that says they can or will do the job, it goes a long way to the success of your business, as well as your own keeping your own sanity.
Well, I'll tell you, it's a lot more time consuming to find the right candidate, but it's a lot less expensive rather than getting the wrong candidate. Let's be honest, because of the things that you mentioned, and internal shrink, just apathy, those can be inherent, because nobody ever looks so good as on their resume. Let's be honest. And
Mhm.
most people who really interview well, you always wonder, do they do this a lot?
Right, they've got a lot of practice.
Yeah, the
But
telegraphing part.
you can use these same principles in your employment ad too. The idea of an employment ad isn't to get as many candidates as you can. The idea of an ad is to pre-screen candidates and excite the ones that have the qualities that you're looking for. You've seen the ads. Are you a type of employee or staff member or whatever that likes to A, B, and C? If I don't like A, B, and C, I'm not going to apply for that job. If I do like A, B, and C, I will apply for that job. And typically it's going to take 10 candidates to find the perfect one. So, plan your time and your resources accordingly. But yeah, it's not a first person through the door gets the job.
Well, this is a very contemporary topic that we've chosen, simply because I know that one of our clients most recently was struggling with a turnover of employees. I think you spent several weeks, or at least several days, speaking to her and crafting the kind of questions that she should ask. She really honed the interviewing process by her own words, and realized that the ones that she'd hired, first of all, she got a little bit more return on her advertising for the candidate, and she got a few more employees as a result by asking the right questions. Because I think of the not only the telegraphing, but the other aspect that you pointed out.
Yeah, making sure that we've got the right skill set, right personality, right
Sure.
attitudes and aptitudes for the job that they're applying for.
Well, we'll have to have her add that testimonial on our website page as soon as we get that up.
That'd be great. And thanks for saying that. But it's just turning art into a science, and that's what business is all about, isn't it, Steve? That if you can write a book you can't make money unless you can uh, manufacture that book or produce that book over and over and over again, right? So
Right.
you don't have, all too often we start out our business as we have the art of plumbing or the art of retail or the art of whatever, but it's not until we turn that art into a science that we have a business, and that's true with all the tasks inside that business as well.
Well, it reminds me of something one of my bosses once told me. He says, it's kind of like peeing when you're wearing a dark suit. It makes you feel all warm inside, but nobody can notice.
All right.
Well, with that, we're about time's up. So another edition of our podcast, and I would like to tell you,
It's a wrap.
that's a wrap. Thanks, Skip.